Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the response essay. This lesson has three parts. In the first part, we're going to talk about what is a response essay. I'll tell you what to expect if you're given this assignment, and also why this assignment is really important. Secondly, we're going to practice reacting to a prompt together. So you'll get a feeling of what it's like to actually react to a prompt. What are some questions you can ask yourself? And what is the brainstorming stage like? And then lastly, we're going to talk about the organization of this essay. So I'll tell you about each paragraph and what you should be putting in each of those paragraphs. So a response essay is sometimes also referred to as a reaction essay. So whether your teacher calls it a response essay or a reaction essay, just know that it's the same thing. A response essay is also very common in almost any discipline in college. So whether you're taking an English class or an art history class, most likely you're going to be asked to write a response essay at some point in that class. Now, depending on the type of class it is, the prompt may look differently. So the prompt is something that each student is given. You're given a prompt by your teacher, and your teacher will ask you to think about the prompt and respond to that prompt. So if you're taking, for example, an English class, the prompt might be something like, respond to this quote or respond to this article. But if you're taking an art history class, it might be something like, respond to this photograph or this painting or this video. So there are many different types of prompt that you could be asked to respond to, and it's really going to depend on the type of class and also on what you're studying. So the one thing that is universal about all response essays is that you're going to be asked to respond to the prompt in this essay. Now, when we say respond, this means talk about your feelings, your opinions, or your personal observations about the prompt. In other words, tell your opinion. What do you think of it? What does it make you think of, right? How do you feel about it? So this is really kind of a fun assignment because it's really all about you. You get to react and tell your opinion and support that. This assignment also practices really important skills that are useful for many other types of essays, because in any essay, we're asked to make a claim and then support it using evidence. And that's exactly what we're going to practice in this response essay. So let's get started by practicing a little bit together. I've got a photograph here on the right side. Some of you may be familiar with this photo, have seen it before, but for others, it might be your first time seeing. It doesn't matter. But what I'd like you to do is to think about, what is your reaction to this photograph, right? You can use the three questions on the left to help guide you. How does it make you feel and why, right? So if you say it makes me feel scared, then say something in the photograph that makes you feel that way. Is it the woman's expression? Is it the kids turning their heads away? What makes you feel this way? Second question is, does it remind you of anything? What does it remind you of and why? Again, point to evidence in the photo to support your answer. And then finally, does it make you want to do something, right? Does it make you feel the need to do something, like a call to action? What does it make you feel the need to do and why? So I'd like you to pause the video, and you can take a few minutes to study the photograph carefully, to think about those questions, and actually to write down some answers to those questions. Okay, so I hope you've already done your notes. I'm going to give you some sample reactions to this photograph. So the first one, actually a student in a previous class told me it makes her feel two emotions. First, she said, I feel worried when I look at the photograph. And I asked her, well, why? Why do you feel worried? And she talked to me about the mother's face, the way her mouth turned down, the way that her eyes were looking off to the distance, and her forehead looked kind of wrinkled, like she was worried about something, and her hand as well, touching her face just slightly. So I thought that was really good evidence to support her opinion that it made her feel worried. Secondly, the same student said, but I also feel secure and safe. And I thought, whoa, that's really interesting. These are like opposite feelings. What makes you feel secure and safe? And she said, well, it's not the mother. The mother makes me feel worried, but the children make me feel secure and safe. When I look at them, how they're holding on to their mother, it reminds me of when I held on to my mother and that feeling I had that my mom will always protect me. So I thought this was a really interesting reaction. Notice that the student just doesn't have one reaction, but two reactions to this photograph, which will make for a really nice essay. The second question I decided to answer myself. What does this photograph remind you of? This photograph reminds me of my grandmother. Not the woman, but the children remind me of my grandmother. And this is because my grandmother grew up during the Great Depression, which was a time in the United States when the economy crashed, many people lost their jobs and had very little food, right? And my grandmother was just a little girl at this time. So the children kind of bring up, even though I didn't know my grandmother, of course, at that time, it kind of makes me imagine what her life might have been like at that time. The second thing that this photograph reminds me of is not a person, right? But it's actually an idea. This photograph reminds me of the idea of how strong women are. Not just one woman, not my grandmother, but all women in general, right? So, and the evidence that I can point to is the woman. She's alone. She doesn't have any other adults to help her take care of her children. And her children, to me, look a little bit scared and they're holding on to her, but still she's keeping them upright and she's keeping herself upright and she's looking into the distance. It makes me think that she is continuing to persevere. She's not giving up, and she's protecting her kids and taking care of them. So to me, that just reminded me of the fact that all women are very strong, even when things are very difficult for them. The last question is, does it make you want to do something, and what and why? And for me, I don't know. This photograph really didn't make me want to do anything. So I put this in here just to show you that you don't have to answer all of the questions. And for some of the questions, you might not have a good reaction to, right? So if I were going to write an essay about this photograph, I would not choose this question to write about because I don't have a lot to say about it. But I definitely have a lot to say about what it reminds me of. And my student has a lot to say about how this photograph made her feel. So that might be a good choice for her. The last thing to remember is that your reaction is going to be different than your classmates, and it's going to be different than mine, right? Because we all look at this photograph with different perspectives and we connect with it in different ways, right? So there's no right or wrong answer in a response, but what's very important is that you point to evidence and you explain in order to support your reaction, right? So you have to convince us by using evidence and explaining. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is how to organize this essay, right? This essay can have as many paragraphs as you want, but for this example, I'm going to show you an essay with 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the introduction. And in the introduction, we're going to start by summarizing the prompt. So remember that the prompt is the photograph or the video or the article, right? For us, it's going to be the photograph. So we're going to tell, what is it? It's a photograph, right? Source information means where did it come from, right? Where did this photo come from? Is it from a newspaper? Is it from your textbook? Is it from, a website? Tell where you got it. The next thing we're going to do is describe the main idea of the prompt. So it's a little bit strange for a photograph, but we just want to kind of tell generally what's it a photograph of. So for this photograph, I would say the main idea is the photograph is of a woman and 2 children, right? Notice that I don't go into detail what the woman looks like or where the children are looking backwards and the woman's looking forwards. I'm just telling in general who's in the photograph. After I describe the main idea, I'm going to describe in more detail, describe in general. So here's where I can talk about the woman touching her face and she's looking into the distance. The two children have their heads turned away. They have messy hair. Their clothes are kind of dirty, right? So here's where I can go into more detail. I can also talk about what's in the background, what's in the foreground, etc. The purpose of this whole part of the introduction is really just to catch the reader up. Your reader has not seen your prompt, so they haven't read the article or seen the photograph or watched the video. So it is your job as a writer to describe the prompt so that the reader will understand what it is, okay? And then the last thing we're going to do in the introduction is, of course, the thesis statement. Just like any good essay, the response essay needs a thesis statement that tells the reader what your main idea is. Remember, for the response essay, the purpose is to tell your response or your reaction. So in the thesis statement, tell your two reactions or your two opinions or feelings about this. After the introduction paragraph, we have the body paragraph number 1. In body number 1, we're going to tell your first reaction or your first response that you talked about in the thesis statement. So for example, let's say in my thesis statement, I said, this photograph makes me feel worried, but also secure. Worried, but also secure. So my first reaction is going to be why the photograph made me feel worried, right? Because that was my first reaction from the thesis. Then I'm going to explain why I felt worried. I'm going to give examples or evidence from the photograph, and I'm going to explain why that evidence made me feel worried. I'm going to do the same thing for body number 2, but of course this one is my second reaction. So this one is why I felt worried. This one is why I felt secure when looking at this photograph, right? Again, that second reaction comes from the thesis statement. Again, I'm going to explain why I felt secure. I'm going to point to examples from the photograph as evidence, and then I'm going to explain why those examples made me feel secure. The last paragraph, I bet you can already guess, is the conclusion. So just like any other conclusion for any other essay, we're going to summarize our main points. For us, that's our thesis and our two reactions. And then we're going to end with a final thought. So this could be a suggestion, a prediction, or an opinion, right? Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a better idea of what this essay is going to look like. You can look for the example, you can look at the example response essay on D2L to help you see what it would actually look like kind of in real life. Okay, we've gone over a lot of information. Let's review what we've learned so far. The response essay is also known as the reaction essay. So same essay, but different name. The response essay, when we're writing a response essay, we are given a prompt from the teacher. And that prompt could be very different depending on the type of class. It could be a photograph, it could be an article, a quote, a video, a news story, or maybe even something else. And in the response essay, we are asked to respond to that prompt. So that means tell how it makes us feel, tell our opinion about that prompt, or tell some observations that we have about that prompt. And then lastly, we talked about the organization of this essay. It begins with an introduction paragraph, then has two body paragraphs. Each body paragraph tells a reaction. And then it concludes with a conclusion. So students, I hope this gives you a good idea of what the response essay is, what we can expect in it, how to organize it, and also how to practice reacting. You can look up any photograph that you have around your house or on the internet, and you can practice by actually responding and tell your reactions to those photographs. Any questions, please feel free to email, and thank you for watching.